My name's Eric Hill. I'm 37. I write back-end architecture for mid-sized companies. Nothing exciting, just quiet code in quiet rooms. I used to think my life matched that tone perfectly. I married Hannah 8 years ago, and from the outside looking in, we were a safe, suburban success story. House in a decent neighborhood. Regular dentist appointments. Dinner around 7:30 unless one of us was swamped. People used to say we were low drama, like it was a badge. I took pride in that. You grow up watching relationships blow up on TV and around you. Friends in endless cycles of breakups and reconciliations, and you start to believe that boring is the goal. So when people asked how we were doing, I'd always shrug and say, we're good, not great, not bad, good. Then one Tuesday evening, all of that got rewritten. It wasn't some explosive discovery, no lipstick on the collar or suspicious hotel charges. It was small, almost forgettable. But sometimes the smallest crack in the wall is how the whole thing starts to fall. I had finished work a little early that day. Nothing special, my last meeting got rescheduled, and I didn't feel like sitting in traffic. I considered going straight home, but Hannah had texted earlier that she was staying late for team planning. So instead, I thought I'd stop for dinner. Nothing fancy, just comfort food, the kind that pairs well with silence. There's this Italian place near our block called Vittorio's. Small, family-run, been there since the 90s. We used to go every couple of Sundays. I knew the menu by heart, knew the servers. They knew us too, the quiet couple at table 4. I walked in, expecting nothing but maybe garlic bread and a glass of wine. But I stopped dead just 2 steps past the door. Hannah was there, sitting at a corner booth I didn't recognize her ever choosing, with a man I didn't recognize at all. He was well-dressed, not overly formal but deliberate. His shirt sleeves were rolled up like he wanted to look casual, but even that looked styled. He was laughing, not loud but in a way that took up space. And Hannah, she was glowing. That's the word that hit me first. Her eyes were brighter. Her posture was different, not rigid, not professional. She leaned in slightly, like his presence pulled her there. But what really caught me, what stopped me cold, was her hand. It rested lightly on his sleeve. Not in a flirtatious, obvious way, but in a comfortable way. Like she had done it before. Like she wasn't even thinking about it. That tiny detail set off alarms in me louder than if I'd seen them kissing. I stood there long enough for her to notice. She turned her head and saw me, and I swear to you, she didn't even flinch. No shock, no guilt. Just a beat of silence before she smiled, soft and composed, like I'd interrupted a boring meeting. "Oh, hey," she said. "Eric, this is Tyler, he's from my department. We were just going over the Q4 vendor reviews. I thought I mentioned it?" She hadn't. Not once. Tyler stood up halfway, offered a handshake I didn't take. That same tight corporate smile. The kind you use when someone walks in on a conversation that isn't meant for them. For a second, I felt like I was intruding into something private, and not in the way she was pretending. I nodded. It was automatic. Then I mumbled something like, "Didn't mean to interrupt," and turned to leave before I even realized I was moving. Outside, the sky had that grayish-blue tint that hits just before night, and the cold had crept in. Hannah followed me out a minute later. Her heels clicked against the sidewalk like she was on her way to a meeting. "Eric," she said with a long sigh. "What are you doing?" I turned around. I could ask you the same. Her arms crossed, her shoulders lifted slightly, defensively. "I told you I was working late." Tyler had notes he wanted to run by me before Thursday's call. "In a restaurant?" "It was convenient. We've met here before. It's quiet and close. You're reading too much into it." There was a pause between us, just air and noise from a nearby bus. Then she tilted her head in that way she does when she thinks I'm being unreasonable. "You're doing that thing again," she said. "Making up stories in your head." I stayed silent. She exhaled again, like I just accused her of a felony. "This is exhausting, Eric," she said, and her voice wasn't angry. It was tired, as if she wasn't trying to justify anything anymore, as if she didn't need to. "I'm allowed to meet coworkers for dinner." You don't need to patrol where I go. And that was it. She didn't wait for me to respond. She turned and walked back inside like the conversation was over. I stood there in the cold for maybe 10 minutes before I left. I walked home. Didn't call anyone. Didn't blast music through my headphones like I normally would. I just walked. And while I walked, I replayed the entire scene over and over. The way her voice didn't change. The way she never looked guilty, only annoyed. The way I was made to feel like I was the problem. That was the first real shift. The first moment I felt something warp between us. It wasn't just what I saw, it was how quickly she reframed it. Like she had already written the script in her head and handed me a role I didn't audition for. Suspicious husband. Insecure. Needy. Overreacting. And I almost believed her. That's the worst part. I got home, opened the fridge, stared into it like answers might be hidden behind the milk carton. Nothing felt solid anymore. I could still smell the scent of her perfume. Faint, expensive, and completely foreign in that moment. I didn't bring it up again that night. When she came home later, she acted like nothing happened. Told me about a new software procurement plan at work. Asked what I ate for dinner. Kissed me on the cheek. I nodded, listened, said I had leftovers. But inside something had changed. A part of me, the part that trusted without question, had gone quiet. Not dead, but waiting, listening, watching. And even though I had no proof, no confrontation, no explosive moment, I knew what I saw. Or maybe more accurately, I knew what I felt. And I couldn't unfeel it. After that night at Vittorio's, something inside me split. Not all at once. Not loud and dramatic, but slow and quiet. Like the start of a leak behind a wall. You don't notice the damage at first. You keep living like everything's fine, telling yourself you're overreacting. But then one day, the paint peels, the air smells different, and you realize it's been broken for a long time. You just didn't want to see it. The next morning, Hannah was humming in the kitchen while pouring coffee. She looked up, gave me a tired smile, and asked if I wanted eggs. I remember staring at her like I was watching someone play my wife on a stage. Same voice, same eyes, but something felt hollow, like I was speaking through glass. I said no thanks, grabbed a protein bar, and left early for work. I just needed space. That was when it started, the cataloging. I didn't even realize I was doing it at first. My mind began flipping through old moments like files. Suddenly, things that once felt innocent now carried weight. Patterns started emerging, and the more I looked, the more I saw. Her schedule, for one. She'd started staying later at work around 6 months earlier. It was gradual at first, maybe once a week. But then it turned into 2, 3, sometimes 4. Always some fire drill or client delay. And I believed her because I had no reason not to. She'd been dedicated to her job since the day I met her. Ambitious, sharp, the kind of person who thrived in pressure. But now, looking back, it felt scripted. Then there were the routes. She used to text me when she was headed home. Always the same message. Leaving now, see you soon. Lately, those had stopped. And when I checked the location history on our shared car app, something we both used to log mileage for work reimbursements, her drop-offs didn't match. Instead of coming straight from the office, there were detours. Places she never mentioned. A street near a park we didn't frequent. A coffee shop across town she claimed was too bitter. The deeper I dug, the more it unraveled. One night, she came home wearing a lipstick shade I hadn't seen before. Plum red. Bold. Not her usual muted tones. I noticed it when she walked in the door, and even more when she came out of the bathroom 10 minutes later with bare lips. She said she just needed to wash her face. I nodded. But a part of me, the new, suspicious part, took note. Another night, she got into bed after I'd already drifted off, or at least pretended to. I wasn't sure what woke me. Maybe the sound of the fridge opening, or maybe the whisper of her voice as she walked down the hall with her phone in hand. When I opened my eyes, the room was dark except for the light spilling in under the door. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Then she came back. Her screen didn't light up again that night. There was also her phone, always face down now. Always locked. She used to leave it on the kitchen counter while cooking, screen glowing with texts from her sister, coworkers, friends. Now it was either on silent or in her pocket, and she jumped at notifications like they were landmines. One Saturday morning, I asked if she wanted to walk to the farmer's market with me, something we used to do together. She looked at me like I'd asked her to hike Everest. "I've got to hit the grocery store anyway," she said, grabbing her keys. "Might as well just go now." She came back 2 hours later with a single bag, almond milk, eggs, and kale. Nothing else. No flowers, no bread, no snacks. I asked if the lines were long. She said yes, didn't make eye contact. When she went upstairs to take a shower, I checked the car mileage again. She'd driven 20 miles. The store was 5 away. Little things added up. Her laundry loads were more frequent but smaller. She started washing her own clothes separately. I asked why once. "Work funk," she said. "I've been sweating more lately. New AC is trash." I didn't push it. On Sundays, she used to be glued to the couch with me, catching up on shows, ordering takeout. But now she'd vanish around noon. "Errands," she said. "Always errands." One day I happened to check our shared iCloud gallery, and I saw a selfie she'd taken in the car. She looked radiant. New earrings. That plum lipstick again. I made a mental note to compliment her later. But when I opened the gallery that night, it was gone. Deleted. I started paying more attention. Not just to her, but to me. How often I made excuses on her behalf. How quickly I downplayed things that didn't sit right. I'd become a full-time defense lawyer in my own head. Every time my gut raised a flag, I overruled it. She's just tired. She's under pressure. She's not doing anything wrong. But that night at the restaurant had cracked something open. I couldn't unsee how natural she looked with him, how unshaken she was by my presence, and how easily she flipped the narrative, made me the suspicious one. The scariest part wasn't what she was doing. It was how good she had become at hiding it. I started sleeping lighter, listening for the sound of the door, watching for how long she lingered in the garage when she got home, noticing the scent that clung to her hair, sometimes musky, sometimes floral, never the shampoo we kept in the shower. I didn't confront her. I wasn't ready. I didn't have hard proof, just a growing web of patterns, inconsistencies, and a sense that the woman I'd built a life with was living another one beside me. At night, I started writing things down in a notes app, not because I wanted to trap her, but because I needed to remind myself I wasn't going crazy, that I had seen what I saw, that my memory wasn't folding in on itself. The more I wrote, the more I realized how far back it went. Months, maybe more, like how she'd started getting dressed in the car. I caught her once coming back inside with her coat unzipped, blouse wrinkled, smelling like some unfamiliar cologne. She said it was a client lunch. I asked where. She paused. "That sushi place on Main." But I'd passed that place on my way home that day. It was closed for renovations. I told myself maybe she meant a different one. I stopped asking after that. Instead, I watched. Not to catch her, but because I was beginning to accept something I hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't stress. This wasn't in my head. It was a pattern, a system, and she'd been perfecting it while I was too busy trusting her to see it forming right in front of me. A month after that night at Vittorio's, I was supposed to fly to Denver for a 3-day project review. It wasn't a trip I wanted to make. Tight deadlines, long meetings, the same hotel chain coffee I'd grown to resent. But it was familiar, predictable, and at that point, predictability felt safer than whatever was happening inside my home. My flight was scheduled for 6:45 a.m. One of those brutal departures that require you to wake up when the world still feels half asleep. But when I got to the airport, the departure board glowed a single message. Cancelled. Mechanical failure. Next flight wasn't until late afternoon. I remember standing there with my carry-on at my feet, staring at the screen like the universe was making a decision for me that I hadn't been able to make myself. I didn't text Hannah. I didn't call. I just walked outside, got in the first taxi I found, and told the driver my address. The ride home felt unreal, like I was drifting toward something I already knew the shape of, even if I didn't want to admit it. Part of me hoped she'd be at work. Part of me hoped she wouldn't. When the taxi pulled into our driveway, the house looked normal. Too normal. Curtains half drawn, porch lights still off. Her car crookedly parked like she'd rushed in the night before. I paid the driver, grabbed my bag, and walked toward the front door. Inside, the air felt wrong. Not bad, just different. Like a stranger had been breathing there. There was a faint scent drifting through the hallway, sweet and woodsy. Absolutely not hers, and definitely not mine. The kind of cologne worn by someone who wants to announce himself without speaking a word. On the kitchen counter, 2 wine glasses rested near a barely touched bottle. Her favorite plates sat abandoned in the sink. Not dirty, just used. Fresh. There were crumbs on the placemats. A napkin crumpled carelessly like it had been dropped mid-conversation. And there, on the back of one of the dining chairs, hung a man's jacket. It wasn't a coworker's blazer. It wasn't some forgotten item from a dry-cleaning run. It was casual, worn, something comfortable enough to be lived in. Something a man takes off when he knows he'll be staying a while. My heart didn't race. It didn't break. It just steadied. Like my body had finally caught up to what my mind had been piecing together for weeks. I walked further into the house. The living room was a mess of pillows on the floor and the throw blanket we usually kept folded over the love seat. Not thrown, discarded. The TV remote lay sideways on the rug like someone had knocked it over. A faint sound floated from upstairs. Music. Soft, rhythmic, the kind of playlist Hannah put on when she wanted to unwind. Not loud enough for a party. Just loud enough for Macy. Each step up the staircase felt like walking into a memory I didn't want to belong to. Halfway up, I paused. My hand hovered over the railing. I could have turned around. I could have left. I could have spared myself the moment that would live in my bones forever. But I didn't. The bedroom door was cracked open, just enough for the light to spill into the hallway. And through that thin line of sight, the entire story unraveled with a single, undeniable picture. Hannah was in bed. Not alone. She was lying on her side, tangled in sheets that used to be ours. Her hair was messy, the way it gets after she sleeps deeply, or after someone runs their hands through it. Beside her, with his back partially turned to me, was the same man from the restaurant. Tyler. His arm draped over her waist like it belonged there. Their clothes were scattered on the chair in the corner. Her blouse, his shirt, the jeans I had seen him wearing weeks before. The Macy of the scene wasn't loud or theatrical. It was quiet, ordinary, familiar in a way that broke me more than anything else could have. They didn't see me, didn't hear me. The music played just loud enough to cover the small sounds of sleep, of comfort, of 2 people wrapped in each other without fear of being caught. I didn't walk in. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything or demand an explanation. I just stood there in the doorway, holding the handle of my carry-on, feeling something inside me settle with a final, cold certainty. People always talk about heartbreak like it's an explosion. But in that moment, mine felt like the opposite. Like someone pressing a palm over a flame until it dies. Quiet, steady. I think part of me had known long before that moment. This was just the confirmation my body needed to stop making excuses. I reached into my pocket, pulled off my wedding ring, and placed it gently on the dresser beside the door. I didn't leave a note, didn't say goodbye. I knew that if I made a sound, any sound, I might collapse into something I didn't want her to see. Without looking back, I walked down the stairs, grabbed my keys, and stepped outside. The morning sun had risen fully by then, painting the house in a warm glow that felt almost mocking. The neighborhood was quiet. A dog barked a few houses over. Someone was mowing their lawn. Life kept moving like nothing had happened. I put my bag in the trunk, slid into the driver's seat, and took one last look at the house. Not with anger, not with nostalgia, just with finality. Then I drove away, not fast, not dramatic, just steady. The same way everything had been before it wasn't. The same way a life ends without noise. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew exactly where I couldn't stay. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't doubt what I'd seen. There was no twisting it, no reframing, no narrative for her to bend. Some truths are too solid to gaslight. And this one would follow me everywhere, until I learned how to live without the version of her I once believed in. When I left the house that morning, I didn't go back to the airport. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even stop to eat. I just drove, the steering wheel steady beneath my hands, the highway stretching endlessly in front of me like an exit ramp from everything I used to be. I didn't have a destination in mind. I didn't need one. Somewhere around mid-afternoon, after 8 or 9 hours of silence and gas station coffee, I crossed the Nevada state line. The desert air felt raw, open, and strangely clean, like it didn't carry the weight of anyone's expectations. I found myself pulled toward a small lakeside town I remembered visiting once as a kid. The name didn't matter. It wasn't on any top 10 lists, and that's exactly what I needed. A place no one would think to look. There was a modest campground just off the main road, nestled between a dry pine grove and a narrow lake that shimmered like broken glass. They rented out trailers by the week, old things with aluminum siding and creaky floors. I paid a month in cash. The woman behind the desk didn't ask questions, just handed me the keys and pointed toward lot 11. The trailer was basic. Bed, table, stovetop. No TV. No Wi-Fi. The silence was immediate, like walking into a vacuum. But instead of choking me, it felt like oxygen. For the first time in weeks, I could hear my own breathing without the background noise of Hannah's voice or the hum of suspicion in my chest. That night I slept. Not well, not deeply, but uninterrupted. No alarms. No half-whispers in the hallway. No dreams of soft music and cracked doors. Just the sound of wind against aluminum and the occasional howl of something wild in the dark. The next morning, I woke early, brewed stale coffee over the tiny stove, and stepped outside barefoot onto the gravel. The lake caught the sunrise in its surface. No one else was awake. I stood there for a long time, not thinking, not planning, just existing. And it hit me. I wasn't trying to forget Hannah. I was trying to remember myself without her. Because somewhere between being a husband, a provider, a man constantly decoding silence and pretending not to see red flags, I had disappeared. So I let myself drift. The routine I built was quiet and stripped down. I'd wake early, walk to the water, eat whatever I had in the small fridge. Mostly fruit, bread, canned soup. I opened my laptop in the afternoons and worked remotely. My clients didn't know anything was wrong, and I didn't tell them. I kept things professional, mechanical, deliverables, deadlines, done. At night, I'd read books I never finished, scribble half-thoughts in a journal, and sit outside watching the moon shift across the sky. No one texted. I had turned off my phone after leaving the house and shoved it in the glove compartment. It buzzed every so often, muffled by layers of cloth and plastic. A reminder that the outside world still existed. I ignored it. The solitude was sharp at first. It scraped away the layers I'd built up over the years, the routines, the autopilot responses, the need to keep the peace. And beneath all that, I found quiet. Not peace, not yet, but quiet. Some days I'd think of her. Not out of longing, but more like touching a scar to see if it still hurt. I remembered small things, unimportant things. The way she used to tap the toothpaste cap on the sink, the smell of her conditioner, the playlist she used for cleaning days. Those things floated through my mind like echoes, but they no longer anchored me. They were just remnants, pieces of a house I no longer lived in. There was a cafe in town with bad coffee and good cinnamon rolls. I'd sit outside with a notebook, watching locals go about their lives. A retired couple who always wore matching tracksuits. A kid on a skateboard with more bruises than fear. A waitress who sang to herself while wiping down tables. I wasn't part of their world, but I watched it unfold like a movie, and somehow that was enough. After a week, I went to a thrift store and bought a fishing rod. Not because I loved fishing, I didn't, but because it gave me an excuse to sit at the lake for hours without doing anything. I didn't catch much. A few tiny things I tossed back. But that wasn't the point. The point was that I could sit there for 3 hours and not think about where she was or who she was with. It was strange. Realizing that the absence I once feared was starting to feel like space. Like air returning to a collapsed lung. I had been so terrified of being alone. But now I understood what I had really feared was being irrelevant. Like without her, I no longer had a story to tell. But I was wrong. Because slowly, without permission, a new version of me was beginning to emerge. Not stronger, not healed, just more mine. One night, after nearly 3 weeks, I turned my phone back on. It was like opening a fire hose. 37 missed calls. Dozens of texts. 5 voicemails. Emails from contacts I hadn't spoken to in years. The first ones were from Hannah. Then her tone shifted. Apologies turned into defenses. Defenses turned into accusations. Accusations turned into silence. Then came a string of messages from a number I didn't recognize. I assumed it was him. Tyler. His messages were short. Cowardly. I never meant for this to happen. I didn't want to ruin anything. Can we talk? Talk? The nerve of a man who could unzip his life into someone else's bed and then ask for a conversation. The final wave of messages came from Hannah's sister, someone I'd always liked. She said she knew, that she was sorry, that she hoped I wouldn't make things worse. That phrase stuck with me, make things worse, as if I'd lit the match. I deleted everything. I didn't write back. I didn't rage text. I didn't draft any long emails explaining how I felt. Because what was there to say that wouldn't feel like begging her to understand something she'd already chosen to ignore? I wasn't interested in being part of her cleanup crew. I had lived long enough inside her versions of reality, the curated ones, the polished ones, the ones where my instincts were labeled controlling, and her lies were framed as boundaries. Not anymore. Not here. Not in the quiet of a lakeside town that didn't know my name and didn't need to. I started making plans to leave the trailer after the month was up. Not because I was running, but because I was ready to go forward. There's a difference. Running feels like fear. This felt like movement. I began to look at job boards. Not because I needed the money, but because I wanted a new rhythm. Something simpler. I called a realtor in Idaho I'd spoken to a few years back when we briefly considered buying a cabin. He remembered me. Said there was a small house available near a wooded hill with a wraparound porch and a lot of quiet. I told him I'd take it. He didn't ask why. And I appreciated that more than I can explain. The morning I left the trailer park for good, the sky was overcast. That dull, flat kind of gray that doesn't promise rain, just a heaviness that lingers. I packed my few things into the trunk of my car. A duffel bag, my laptop, a handful of worn clothes, and a small box of notebooks I'd filled during the last month. Most of them were scribbled thoughts, moments I needed to trap on paper so they wouldn't rot inside me. Not poetry, just survival. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. There was no need. The woman at the front desk barely looked up when I handed her the key. I drove north with no music playing. Just the sound of the road and the creak of the passenger seat. About 2 hours in, I finally glanced at my phone again. I hadn't checked it since the day I deleted everything, but I felt ready, detached. There were more messages. Dozens. Most of them from Hannah. I opened them in order, not because I wanted to read them, but because I needed to see the progression. It started soft. Apologies. Please. Variations of can we talk? And you don't understand. Then came the rewriting. It didn't mean anything. You walked away too fast. It wasn't what it looked like. After that came the bargaining. We built a life. You were never supposed to find out like that. Let's go to counseling. And then, when that didn't work, the narrative flipped. You've always been emotionally distant. You act like a victim, but you're not innocent. You made it impossible to talk to you. I felt nothing as I read them. Not anger. Not grief. Just a kind of clinical curiosity, like reading a story I used to be part of but had long since outgrown. One message, in particular, stuck with me. It came at 2:41 a.m. 2 nights ago. I don't know how we got here. One day we were laughing in the kitchen, and the next you're gone like I'm some stranger. I made mistakes, but you didn't even give me the chance to explain. I don't think that's fair. Fair. That word, of all words, triggered something in me. Because I remembered how many times I'd walked past signs that weren't fair. How many hours I'd waited for her to come home without question. How many nights I pretended not to notice lipstick wiped off or a phone turned face down or an alibi that didn't quite land. Fair was when I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Fair was when I trusted her with silence. Fair was every damn time I swallowed my instincts so she wouldn't feel accused. She burned through fair months ago. And still, she reached for it like it was a wee *p*n. Something she could wield to put me back in the role she'd written for me. The understanding husband. The one who doesn't yell. The one who can be guilted into staying just a little longer, talking just a little more, hoping just enough to delay the truth. But not anymore. Then came the voicemails. Her voice was tight, cracked in some, sharp in others. She alternated between desperation and disappointment, trying every angle to pull me back in. Like a tide trying to drag a boat it had already lost. You're making a mistake. I still love you. You're not thinking clearly. You're being cruel. Cruel. That one made me laugh. Quietly, bitterly. As if leaving the room when someone else has already decided to destroy the relationship from the inside is cruelty. As if silence, finally, after months of deception, is some kind of sin. But what really caught me off guard wasn't her voice. It was his. Tyler. Somehow he got my number. Maybe from her, maybe from someone else. Maybe he thought reaching out would make him look noble. A man trying to clean up the mess. I played the message while pulled over at a rest stop outside Twin Falls. The sound of his voice made my skin crawl in a way I hadn't expected. Hey Eric. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what happened. It wasn't supposed to go that far. We didn't plan this. It just happened. I care about Hannah, but I never meant for it to come between you two. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. That last line. If you ever want to talk. Like we were just two guys caught up in a misunderstanding. Like this was high school drama and not the unraveling of a marriage. I deleted it before he finished the second sentence. Then came the final wave, from people I hadn't expected. Her sister. Her mother. One of her friends who had once hugged me at a barbecue and said I was too good for this world. They all knew. They'd known for weeks, maybe months. And now they were messaging me not out of support but out of concern. Please don't do anything rash. She's in a bad place. You were always the stable one. I sat there at that rest stop with the sun beating down on the windshield and realized they weren't checking on me. They were trying to protect her version of events. Because in her version, I disappeared. In her version, I didn't fight for the marriage. In her version, I left before she could fix it. But the truth? The truth is I stayed far past the expiration date. I stayed through the lies, through the doubts, through the slow erosion of trust that she smiled through like nothing was happening. I stayed through nights where my gut screamed and I told it to shut up. I stayed when the love was already halfway out the door. And when I finally left, it wasn't a reaction. It was a release. I put my phone down and stepped outside, letting the heat soak into my skin. There was a small bench near a cluster of vending machines, and I sat there drinking flat soda and watching the trucks roll past on the highway. And for the first time since all of this began, I realized I didn't feel broken. I felt clear. Clarity doesn't arrive like a lightning strike. Comes slow. Creeps in once you've drained all the justifications, burned through all the excuses, and finally stood still long enough to feel what's real. And what was real was this. I didn't want her back. Not even a little. Not the way she was. Not the version of her that stood in the restaurant pretending a hand on someone else's sleeve was nothing. Not the version that gaslit me, rewrote the narrative, and made me question the ground under my feet. And definitely not the version that turned my silence into cruelty because she couldn't *p*nize it. I got back in my car and drove west. By the time night fell, I crossed into Idaho, pulled into a motel off the side of a hill, and watched the stars come out like slow truths. I didn't cry. I didn't feel like screaming. I just slept with the window cracked, the wind whispering through it like a quiet promise. And in the morning, I didn't check my phone. Because I already knew what it would say. And I already knew I didn't need to hear it anymore. I returned only to collect my things. Hannah sat on the bed, eyes full of words I no longer needed. I said nothing. I gathered my documents, photos, and memories worth keeping. I didn't leave a note or ask for closure. I walked out with the quiet understanding that I wasn't leaving her. I was leaving the version of me that tolerated being broken. Now I live in Idaho, near a hill, with peace and a dog named River. No one knows my story, and I don't need to explain it. One day, Hannah messaged, saying she finally realized who she lost. I never replied, because I'm not waiting for her to understand. I'm living, and that's enough.